This is Gemara Bava Metziah Daf Zayin, and we're holding on the bottom of Vav Amid Beis, in the middle of this incredible sugya of Takva Kayin. Quick review for the last few lines is that Rabba came along and Rabba wanted to say that Takva Kayin, Moitziin Miyadai, that if the Kayin grabs the Safik Bachar, we would take it away from him. Just to remind us, as we'll come full circle in a few moments, we're in the middle of the larger sugya of two people holding a two people, and one of them grabs it from the other. Do we Metziah miyadai or ein Metziah miyadai? And if we say we don't take it away from him, is he allowed? Is the other one allowed to be makdish it? So Rabbi said, "Takva kayin Metziah miyadai." He does not have the ability to do that. Amr le Abaye, says Abaye, we're about 12 lines from the bottom. The first line is B'Mainishal Kayin. Said Abaye, Loitistaye lemar. You, Rav Chananya, wanted to bring a raya to Rabba. What was your raya? Your raya was as fakis dechlas ladir lehisaser. That in a case in which there are suffix animals, you're not sure whether they are firstborns or not, you're allowed to put them into the corral to use as meiser. So he said that if the kain would be allowed to take it, then how would you be allowed to put these into the corral? It's the kains. From the fact that you can put it into the corral is a raya, clearly that it's not the kains. Takva kain might see in miyadai. Says Abaye, Amr le Abaye mishama loy tistayim. This is not a raya, says Abaye. Why? Because Achmai is going to say El Tisha V'hu. Said Abayik, the case is that there's only 9 animals plus this suffix animal is another number 10. The Manav Shach. Yibarach Eyuva Shabakam Ha'yisir Lavar Chiyot Tisha Lavar Yisir Ain't Nenu. So that was Abaye rebuttal to Rav Chananya Zaraya to Rabba. Continues the Gemara. This is really where we left off. Hadar Amar Abaye. So Abaye rolls it back. So Abaye now is saying that no, I agree with the raya of Rav Chananya to Rabba. That talk for kayin moitzi and miyadai. Lamelsi damris desfeika lavar yisuru. Says Abaye, no. What I said is not true. What I said that talk for kayin yes, keep it. It's not true. Says the Gemara, why desfeika lavar yisuru? For the lacha is that an animal which is a suffix, there's no din on meiser at all. So therefore, it must be that the kayin is not able to grab such an animal. De'tenan. So Abaye now is bringing a raya that there's no din of meiser in the case of a suffix. In the case of a suffix by a suffix, there's no din of meiser at all. Kafat echad min amenuyin. Says the Gemara, an interesting case. You're in the middle of counting off the sheep for a meiser, and what happens? One of them goes and jumps back into the corral. So now you have, 100 animals. And one of those 100 was already utilized in the count, already took off meiser. So what do? You have a suffix mixed in to your whole group. Suffix echad. What's the halacha? Says the Mishnah, fascinating halacha. Kulan peturin. They're all pot. So says the Baya, if you're going to tell me that a suffix you have to take off meiser, laser miman of shach, you should still take off meiser. Why? Di bar chiyuvo, shaper meiser do the right thing. We love bar chiyuvo. Niftar b'minyan aroi, it would be potter anyways. If it's lavar bar isurei, lavar chiyuvo, excuse me, niftar b'minyan aroi, which are the code words of that a suffix is potter. Minyan aroi, meaning the fact that it was already counted, makes it automatically and forever exempt from meiser. Therefore, you don't have to take off the Amar Rava. Minyan haroi, potter. As we turn over to Zayin Amar Aleph. Minin haroi poiter. So says Abaye. So it must be that we do have a good raya to Rabba. Elamayisach lemeimar, says Abaye. So rather, what are you going to tell me on the top line of Zayin Amid Aleph? And as the top Rashi speaks out, What's the reason why we don't say it's pater manashach? It must be the reason is, says the Gemara, it must be that the only time you take off meiser is when it's a vadai, only when we know for sure. And therefore, if one of kafat echad min haminuyin, if one of the ones that you counted jumped back into the corral, there's no din of meiser at all. So therefore, in such a case, you'd be pater from meiser, and therefore we have a raya to Rabba that if a kohen were to take it, moitzi and miyadai. And again, just to speak out the obvious, moitzi and miyadai means we take it away from the kohen, which means that the kohen does not have the ability to grab the animal in such a case of suffix. So it says the Gemara, we're 3 lines to the top of Zayin Amud Aleph, and now the Gemara really questions the whole thrust of this whole raya. This whole raya of Rav Chananya began with a Tanya, a Bryce that spoke about a Sveikus Nechnasan Ladir Lis Aser. Sveikos, what was the suffix? We were assuming it was the suffix Bechar. Says the Gemara now, Amar Lei, Rav Achami Difti Liravina, my Sveikus. What was that case of Sveikos? If you're going to tell me that it's Safik B'chayrais, that you're not sure if the B'char was given to the Kayin or not. Yeah, Kaidish Amar Achmana, V'lo Shekvar Kadosh. Says the Gemara that the only time that an animal has to be utilized in Meister is Kaidesh. Only an animal that became Kadosh is a din of Meister. But a Bachar, there's no din of Meister at all. So says the Gemara, you know what the case is? It's not a stam suffix Bechar, but rather a suffix Pidyon, the animal which is utilized in redeeming the firstborn. We redeem it with the lamb. That animal, we redeem the donkey with the lamb. We redeem the chamar with the peter. So that animal, that's the case of Safek Uchede Rav Nachman. Before we see Rav Nachman, let's just see Rashi for a moment. My Sveikos, as we pointed out, Sveikos the Chas Lisaser. Safek bin Yibet Chamar Telesha Hofrash al Safek Peter Chamar. You separated a sheep for the Safek of the donkey. Shafilu Hi Peter Chamar, that even if it is redeeming the donkey, Vadai. Ein batal azeshal pidin misham kedusha. It itself is not batal cause of kedusha. Ochede Rav Nachman explains the Gemara. Dam Rav Nachman 7 lines down. Am Rav Ravua Yisrael. Well, sheishle asara safek pitri chamar. He has 10 animals in which he's not sure, in which there's a safek. They are the firstborn donkey. B'toich beis in his house. What does he do? Mafresh alein. He separates asara seyin, 10 sheep, and on those animals which are the redemption of those umaisrin. Those, of course, he has to take off meiser. Ve'hein shaloi, and he keeps them. Why does he keep them? Because it's a suffix. Since it's a suffix, this is the whole sugya that we're talking about. So he has to do a hafrashas meiser. Once he does the hafrashas meiser, now who keeps the part that was gemeiser, the part that's taken off? The Yisrael keeps it due to the suffix, and then the Kayin would have to bring a raya. So says the Gemara, that is the case of Sveikis Nechlas and Ladir. But after getting slightly tangential with the Gemara and Amid Beis, with the Kayin grabbing it, we are really in the middle of a discussion. And says the Gemara, my Hava Allah de Misusa, what happened with that bathhouse that they were fighting over, and one of the parties got up and it was makdishit? Tashem Adam Rav Chever Rav Navi of Dabi Rav Chis Rav Chis Dabi Ravuna Upashta Mi Adam Rav Nachman, and they answer the kasha from Rav Nachman called Mama Chin Yachlo Yitzia B'Dayanim. Any money that you cannot extract, that you will not win in Bezdin, Hekdesh Einai Kadosh. you're not able to be makdish it. So therefore, in this case of the bathhouse, that it's clear that he will not be able to necessarily win in Bezdin, the hektish does not work. Says the Gemara, 1 second. What's the obvious diak? The obvious implication is if you are able to get out of the yadim, then hektish is yes, kadosh. Afal kav, asks the Gemara, deloy afke. Sounds like you could be makdish even if it's not in your possession, even though you didn't actually win in Bezdin. So what's the problem? Ve'omar Rav Yochanan teaches Rav Yochanan loi gezav lo niseishu abaylim shneim eni chayil lakdishai. What do you mean? If something's not in your possession, you can't be makdish it. If someone steals and is makdish something, doesn't work. Why? Zel lefi she'enai shaloi, the kaslam, zel lefi she'enai bershusai, the owner. So says the Gemara, how in our case, even if he was, able to win it in Bezdin, how could he be makdish it? Explains the Gemara, mi savris, b'mesusa metaltal naskina. Are you thinking we're talking about a movable bathhouse, more of a bathtub? B'mesusa mekarkoi askinon. Dealing with karka, land, a real, like a pool. It's therefore, as soon as you could, extract it with dayanim, if you'd be able to win the court case, Vershusei Kaimo, it's considered to be in his reshus. So that's the Gemara. That is the maskana with the Mesusa. That what? If you could win an Bezdin, you could be makdish it. In our case, clearly you were not able to, and therefore you would not be able to be makdish it. From there, we segue on to a new sugya. Tani Rav Tachlifa B'Marava Kamid Ravua, about 15 lines before the Y line. Shnaim Adukim B'Talis. Back to our Talis case. Zeno to Amakim Sheyodo Magas. Zeno to Amakim Sheyodo Magas. Ashar Cholkin B'Shav. Says the Gemara, not Shnaim Oichzim B'Talis, slightly different. They were Adukin, which is more of a lashon. They're grabbing onto it. Is more of the talis seemingly under their hands. What's the din? Says Rav Chatachlifa Bar Ma'arava in front of Rav Avua. Each one takes whatever part of the talis is under his hand, and then the rest they divide it. And on that, Machli le Rav Avua. Rav Avua pointed. Rav Avua mentioned and gestured. You don't just split it, shvua. But rather what? But rather you need to make a shvua. Ask the Gemara, what did our Mishnah say? Yachloiku, they split it. And it did not say that each one gets until the place that his hand reaches. So what's the case in the Mishnah? That the Mishnah is not holding the actual garment, holding the fringes of the garment. But in a chanami, that if something was within his hand, he would actually get that. No, we learn from here. Hi sudra, a handkerchief keeping the office base shalosh al shalosh. Once it's within a 3 by 3 finger length of his hand, then Karinan Be, we consider it an asan lirei that it's given to his friend. The command, the boss like dummy, because that which is in your hand is like it's yours, and therefore the kani, you have a kinyan on it. Says the Gemara, my shenamid Rav Chisda. How's it fit in any case from Rav Chisda? The Amar Rav Chisda. Get biyado, Mashicha biyado. He says Rav Chisda, if the get is in her hand and the string in his, and again, we just said that once there's 3 by 3 fingers under one guy, that area is considered his, and therefore he has a kinyan. Ask Gemara 1 second, in case in kin, if she is holding the get, and the husband's holding the string that's attached to the get, the Allah Rav Chisda taught us if he could pull it away from her, they're not divorced. But if not, migureshes. So why over there? It's in her hand. So if it's in her hands, why do I care if he could pull it away? The moment it's in her hands, she should be divorced because it's tachas yada. It should be considered like it is hers. Says the Gemara, also krisos beina v'leka hachanasina beina v'aika. In the case of krisos, in the world of a get, there's a higher level that you need, and that is the reason why. That is the reason why it only works if you can't pull the get back to your hand. But if you can pull it back, then it won't work. Amar Rava, says Rava, Ma'aseh talis musheves cholkin. Says Rava, another case about our talis. If the talis is golden, then cholkin. If we have a golden talis, then what is the halacha? The halacha of a golden talis is that you split it. Says the Gemara Pshita, Shkayach Rava. It's mamish the dinar Mishnah. What's your chiddush? The gold is in the middle. Hanami Pshita. The gold is closer to one side. I would have thought that he could say, one guy could say maybe split it this way, and therefore one is going to get more, because if it's closer to one side, so maybe he should get more. No, you split it whichever way that they each get an equal amount of the golden talis. Two people are holding on to a star now. The lender says it's mine. You owe me the money. I dropped it and you found it. And the borrower says, no, it was yours. But I already paid you up. So what do we do over here? They're both holding the star, and we're trying to figure out whom owes the money. So we have a machlokes. It says Rabbi, you have to be Mekayim, you have to certify the star. Shlomo says you split it. Continues the Brisa. Let's say the star falls liyad dayin, then they never can get it back from him. Rav Yesi it remains in its status. Okay, we have three parts of this brisa. Let's dive deeper as always. Amar Mar. 7 lines to the bottom. Some of Rabbi said you're mekayim it. V'gavale malve kulei. Says the Gemara, wait. So if the malva, the lender is mekayim, he certifies this document, then what? He could collect the entire halva. What happened to our Mishnah? V'lesle masnisa shayim ha'yichzim b'tals v'chulu. Amar Rav Nachman. B'mekuyam, you're right. Divrei HaKol yachloiku. Says Rav in the name of Rav Nachman, if the document is mekuyam, everyone agrees, you split it like our Mishnah. Ki pligi was machlokes in Rabbi and Rashbag. B'sheinoi mekuyam. Rabbi Savar, moed b'shar she'kasu sarich le'kaimoi. Says Rabbi, if one is moida about the document that he wrote, he has to admit it. And therefore, v'mekayim le polik. If he splits it, then Rebbe doesn't hold if he's splitting it the whole thing. If he splits it, then he gets half. V'loi mekayim le loy polik. My time, just a piece of paper. Says the Gemara. And therefore, it's a piece of paper. It's the borrower. When he said it's true that you wrote it, but I paid you back. But a kamer de priya, but he said he paid it back. And therefore, you cannot collect. That's a shita of Rabbi. Rashbag Savar, 2 lines at the bottom of the Rishash Kasu, Ein Sarach Lekayim. Vavkav's Lo Mekayim, therefore the status quo is even without Kiyam Yachlaiku, they'll split it. Now, therefore they'll split it. And that's the Machlaikis Rabbi and Rashbag. What was the next case of the Brisa? Falls into the possession of the dayan, then you can never get it out. Says the Gemara on the top of Zayin Amid Beis, why is it any different if it fell into the possession of the dayan, possession of the judge? Then we say lo yoitzi olamis. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava Hachikam. This is what's going on. If someone else, not the Malvin, not the Loiva, finds a star that was in the possession of a dayan, Shavli Adayin, Vechidami. What does that mean that it was in possession of a dayan? Because of a handpick, that there was a handpick on it. Handpick is a certification. Handpick is a stamp proving this is a valid document. Then lo yotzi olamis, it can never be collected. It can never be collected unless there are edim. That what does it mean? It means that it was certified in Bezdin. Says the Gemara, and it's pashis 4 lines to the top. Loi kasabei handbake, that if it was not certified, that you won't return it because we have a svar to say lava. Maybe he wrote the document to make a halva, but he never borrowed the money, so he certainly can't return it. That's the chiddush. Timekuyam. That even though it's a certified document, so the halva, the loan, certainly happened. But if a third party finds it, why not? The chashinan lipi royin, because maybe the loiva is right that he actually did pay it back, as Rashi speaks out. The Brisa continued and said that Rav Yosi argues on this last case. What does Rav Yosi say? Teaches Rav Yosi Omer Harehu b'chazkasai. Says Rav Yosi, the document remains in its chazaka, which seemingly seems that chazkasai. One more time. And we're now chayshesh, says Rav Yosi, that it is paid back, and the fact that there is a shtar allows the malva to collect. Meaning, if there is a document, therefore means that there's still alva. As Rashi speaks out, because as soon as you pay up, what do you do with the document? You rip it up. Asks the Gemara of Lo Chayish Rav Yosi Lepirayin. Is Rav Yosi not worried about payment? V'atani learned in a brayso matzah shtar ksuba b'shok. If you find the ksuba on the street, bisman shabal moideh. If the Baal admits that they're still married and that he has not paid back his wife, Yachzer li, she gives it to his wife. Ein a Baal moideh, if the Baal does not admit, lo Yachzer lo lazeh v'lo lazeh. We don't return it to either one, says the Tanakama. Because we don't know, maybe she already collected. Rav Yosi Omer, says Rav Yosi, depends. If they're married, if she's still living with him, then Yachzer Lisha, because then the status quo is clear that it was not paid back. Nisarmla, Niskarsha, then Lo Yachzer Lo Zev Lo Zev. So the fact that when Nisarmla, Niskarsha, you don't return to anyone shows us that Rav Yosi is Chayshesh for Pirayin, is concerned that it was paid back. Answers the Gemara, you got to switch up Rav Yosi Tanakama. But says the Gemara, 1 second, the Bryce says, Nafli Adayim Lo Yitzi Olamis, Divi Rav Yosi, Chamaimrim Ariva Chazkasai. So again, we're switching up the Brisa. We're switching up our original Brisa. That Chachamim are the ones that saying you're nachish for Pirayim, and Rav Yosi is. Now kasha the Rabbanan. If we switch it up, now we have a stira in the Dirabanan. So says the Gemara, you're right. Let's go back. Shtar Ksuba, the case of the Ksuba is Kula Rav Yosi. Because again, the case of the Ksuba was a Machlek Tanakam and Rav Yosi, then whichever way you go, we're going to have a stira. So says the Gemara, no. The case of the Ksuba really is all Rav Yosi. We just have to add in an extra words. Eina Baal Maida. In the case that the Baal does not admit, you don't return it. But when do we say that? Is only why? Then so teretz number 1 is that really the whole brayso by Ksuba is Rav Yosi and there's no kasha at all. Rapapa has a different approach. How to answer up the Braysos, don't switch around. Rav Yosi l'divrayim the Rabbanan ka'amar lahu, and the Brayso of Ksuba is Rav Yosi responding to the Rabbanan in classical sense. According to me, says Rav Yosi, I'm never worried about Pirayin, and you always return it. But according to you, the Chachamim, you should at least admit to me. While they're still married, give it to the Isha. The Rabbanan responded, say the Rabbanan like Subis to Gedin, that maybe the husband gave her bundles, maybe gave her up a kadin, which eventually will pay back the Ksuba, and therefore we would not return it. Says the Gemara, now a third teretz. Again, the first teretz was Kula Rav Yosi. Rav Papa's teretz was Rav Yosi responded to the Rabbanan. Ravina Amar Leila Meimel Kabaisa. Really switch it up. The time of the Rabbanan is why over here, the Rabbanan have a different concern by Ksuba, which does not exist elsewhere. Elsewhere, they're not worried about Pirayin. But over here we are because of the concern of Shtei Ksubais. Rav Yosi, the Shtei Ksubais, Loi Chayish. And that really ends off the sugya. Now, The Gemara now goes back to what we learned on Zayin Amid Aleph. On the bottom of Amid Aleph, we learned the case of Machlekes Rebbe and Rashbag. What was the Machlekes? The Machlekes was Shnayim Oichzin Bishtar. Rebbe said the Malvik cannot collect, whereas Rashbag said Yachloiku. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Elazar teaches Rav Elazar Machlekes, that Machlekes Rebbe and Rashbag is B'sheshneim Adukin B'toifes Ushnehem B'toirif. We'll see in a second, Toifes and Toirif are two different parts of the document. But says the Gemara, the Machlekes is only when they're holding both equally both parts of the document. So what is the difference between Toifes and Toirif? Toirif, for the word, we remember this for the word Toirif, like Toirah, that is the ikar part of the shtar. For a moment, and I know we're basically out of time, we look at Rashi. Rashi says, Machlekes hayachloikin domer shimning amliel damash cholkin b'shaveh is shnei madukin b'toirif kolaima. We're still in Rashi. What is the Tairif? Here it is. Says Rashi, Tairif is the Giloi Shel Shtar, the Ikr, the revealing of the Shtar, Makam Aleva, V'amal, V'amois, V'azman, all the integral ingredients, the lender's name, the borrower's name, the time, and the cash flow. What's the Taifes? Is all the other wordage of the Shtar, which the Gemara eventually is going to get to. So says Rav Elazar, if they're both holding equally the Taifes and the Tairif, they split it equally. But if one person is holding the part of the document that has all the good details, and the other one just holding the excess document, each one takes the part that they're holding. For Rav Yochanan, Rav Yochanan argues on Rav Elazar, and says Rav Yochanan, the Olam Cholkin, you always split it up. Says the Gemara, and with this we conclude a kasha Rav Yochanan. Va'afilu acharadik b'toifes acharadik b'toirif. Rav Yochanan holds cholkin. But we learned that in the case of Shnayim, Adukin, Betalis, each one takes what's under his hand. So if they're holding different parts, why would Rav Yochanan say you split it? Says the Gemara, the case is, the Tairif is in the middle, so no one's holding it. They're both holding the sides of the document, which is the Taifes, the Tairif in the middle, and that's what Rav Yochanan meant that you split it. Says the Gemara, remember what's the Chiddush? It's closer to one side. Mamish, the same thing like we saw in the case of the golden talus, that the gold part was closer to one side and we still split up equally. Says Rabbi Yochanan, it's the same thing over here. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmaya.